Hello and welcome to the Groupthink Gaming Roundtable podcast and Twitch stream simultaneously. I am Zach, your host, and I'm joined today by...
Russ.
I'm Craig.
I'm Hannah.
And we will be talking about the game Watchdogs 2, if you couldn't tell by the screen, those of you watching. We played Watchdogs 2 on PlayStation 4, and I actually played it on PC. Which is, I think, all of the gameplay you'll be seeing in the video here. And Hannah did not play this time. So everything that we're talking about is going to be news to Hannah, and she will probably just be confused by most of it. But we'll see what she has to say about it regardless. First thing we'll start off with, as one might expect, would be our general impressions. We started with Russ on our last podcast, so we'll start with Craig.
Alright, well, my general impression was that it just felt like a Grand Theft Auto game to me. It had some gimmicks to it, and they were sort of interesting, but it didn't really build on them or make them deep enough to actually be different gameplay. They were just sort of felt tacked on to GTA.
Russ, scratching.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna...
No, sorry.
Okay. So, my impressions of the game were that it was, like Craig, a derivative of GTA, but that's to be expected, seeing as it's a sequel to Watchdogs, which was, I felt, more derivative than this one, where they seem to have added a lot of things that were more solidly trying to break away from the sort of GTA formula, which is made up of shooting and driving. Those are the two gameplay elements, whereas this added the drone control, the network hacking, and the random mini games and the free running. So I think that their mistake was hanging onto the GTA elements, and I wish that they had less of those and more of their own sort of unique flavor.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I haven't actually played that many GTA clones, I guess I would say. So, I mean, I can obviously see the similarities, but it didn't feel quite so stale to me, just driving around and shooting people. But I definitely liked the kind of unique aspects, the hacking, and I liked the ideas behind the hacking. I thought they could have been better developed. I liked the ideas behind, some of the stealth, but it could have been better. So yeah, I definitely liked it. I liked the story as well. But again, I saw the same thing, very similar to GTA and other kind of games in that genre.
I think one of the big problems that Watch Dogs 2 has was that it had too many irons in the fire, so to speak. Mm. It was trying to have too many diverse gameplay mechanics, and it didn't really make any of them the focus, so it just kind of felt like arbitrary, the things that you decided to, if you wanted to shoot this guy or hack something, it just felt like it didn't really have any meaning one way or the other.
It's that same thing you see in a lot of AAA games, especially from Ubisoft, where they think the sandbox means that the bigger it is and the more things you have in it, the better it is, when what they sacrifice is focus and cohesiveness of gameplay experience.
So the 2 minutes I watched of it, so I was confused exactly what they were going for tonally, if it was more serious and supposed to be realistic, or if it was just kind of supposed to be crazy. Because the stuff that you could do with the hacking just didn't even seem like it was realistic in any world.
Well, it treads a line somewhere in between GTA's sort of, I hate to say realism for GTA either.
The later stuff went a little more. The later GTA games went more realistic than the earlier.
That's true, but at the same time, you're still able to rack up a body count in the triple digits and get away with it. So obviously, you have to suspend some amount of belief, but I think that Saints Row is the other end of the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
we'll say, for this. GTA being the most realistic option that we have, Saints Row being the most ridiculous. And Watch Dogs tries to sit somewhere in the middle. At least Watch Dogs 2 does. The first one, I would say, it was much more close to Grand Theft Auto in tone. But I like that because it is a video game. You know, it is a fictional world where they have all these interconnected pieces of technology where cars and sewage pipes and phones and security cameras are all in the same sort of networks. You know?
Right.
It's okay, I think, in a game. It didn't bother me.
So I thought that splitting the difference was like a really bad strategy. I thought you should capitalize strongly on one side or the other, because splitting the difference makes it feel schizophrenic. Like, I felt like I was getting whiplash between the cutscenes and between some of the missions, and then other sections where I was just getting somewhere. Like, in a mission, it would be structured so that if I wanted to, I could use the environment to non-lethally move through and be stealthy, or use the RC car to, like, not hurt anybody or not ever be noticed. But when I was literally trying to drive somewhere without using fast travel, I would kill more people by accident just because the car controls are GTA car controls. And, like, just traversing the environment felt... I don't know. There were just clearly parts of the game that were more carefully designed than others, and it just felt like if it had been more careful and tried to be really realistic, I could have gone with that. Or if it had gone with the Saints Row, like, whatever, we're a game, let's have fun, it would have been better instead of just sort of really sharply shifting gears between the two.
I think that segues into a really good point that has been brought up by a lot of reviews already, and that's the dissonance between the gameplay and the story, the character. The ludonarrative dissonance is the fancy pants term that exists for it, where in the cutscenes these are just goofy kids goofing around talking about how these other people are the bad guys, and then you break into, you know, the Google surrogate office and kill 25 security guards in the name of freedom. You're not the good guy, but you talk as if you are, and it's ridiculous. I think that it would have been better served if they had eliminated some of that level of violence, and I think that they could have done that in the position that they're in, where they're trying to strike a balance. They could have done that in a number of ways. They could have gone in a silly route with a bunch of crazy non-lethals, you know, or they could have made conflicts between individuals much more serious and dangerous, as to, you know, lower the body count and make death of a guard or an innocent a more major plot point.
I'm going to say something not important for a second while I open this, because this is going to get cut out of the audio. But one thing that one idea that I actually had mentioned to Craig earlier.
Oh yes, this was an excellent idea.
One thing that would have felt really thematic and kind of go along with the kind of narrative of the game, and would sort of allow for people to die without totally breaking the immersion, would be every time you're killing people, any innocent people, basically you lose followers, because people don't want to follow DedSec if they are, you know, killing people, or if the people following are literally being killed, like run over on the streets. I thought it would have been funny to see your follower count go down by 1 every time you ran somebody over, and that would have, you know, obviously that wouldn't have balanced it, but, you know, lose 1,000 followers for every person you kill, and suddenly you have a really big incentive to not kill people. But if it has to happen, you know, like it feels like a big cost, you know, like, and that feels like it would be a little bit more thematic.
It makes it a weighty decision instead of... Because that's the problem with the mechanics of GTA games, is that the violence was always supposed to be not taken seriously, or to be, like, sort of ultra-violent and over the top. And so when you put that next to themes that are serious, they just don't play together very efficiently.
Yeah, you can't be only a part-time satire because you undermine all of your other points.
Right. One thing that was kind of related that I noticed was that part of the gameplay obviously didn't feel very realistic, some of the hacking and that sort of thing. But the world itself, like, that your characters live in actually felt pretty, like, real and, like, well detailed to me. If you looked at, like, I noticed, and Craig actually noticed this, pointed out to me, there were, like, dogs that were chasing, like, birds in the park, and there were two, like, individual dogs that, like, had this...
It didn't
seem... Oh, it was a frisbee?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they had, like, these little details, and the conversations that people have, like, the little background dialogue, always felt like a very, like, very candid, like, you know, you were actually listening to a real person's conversation and not, like, a game NPC. And, you know, sometimes they were talking about something, you know, dead sec or, you know, whatever. Oh, these hackers are, like, messing everything up or, you know, whatever. But a lot of times they were just talking about totally random shit that sounded really real. And there were, you know, obviously a lot of different environments. It's based on real life San Francisco, so I mean the layout is going to feel real even if it's not exact. So the world felt real, and I felt like the characters felt real as well. You know, the main characters were very believable to me. But yeah, the disconnect in the fact that they're killing people and the fact that they can, like, hack any computer from, you know, 1,000 miles away or whatever. I mean, we'll go into details on that later, but the hacking itself was not realistic either. So that was kind of a big disconnect to me. Whereas, like, in Saints Row, like, the world doesn't exactly feel super real, just based on the stuff that's happening. And I haven't played it, but yeah, I've seen it played, and so you kind of get, it's not as much of a disconnect when unrealistic stuff happens, whereas the real world is what it seems like they're trying to get to, basically.
Yeah, it's almost like the uncanny valley, but for a simulation of real life. So the more realistic you make your ambient surroundings, the more, like, absurd video game actions feel. Mm-hmm. So it might, like the uncanny valley, behoove designers to make environments slightly less realistic in that sense, so that the player's actions don't stick out as much of a sore thumb as they do.
Well, that brings up an interesting idea to me. Would you say that it would then be better for... What would you prefer to see, I guess is how I would say it. Would you have preferred to see the developers either ratchet down the capability of your actions and sacrifice some of the gameplay elements, or would you rather have seen them make the world more cartoonish?
I'm not sure, honestly. I think it could be done well either way. I think, based on the story and the thematic elements of this game, I would pick make your character weaker and make your actions less absurd in general because it fits with the theme. But the other way, I think, could work just as well.
There was one thing that you expressed to me when we started talking about this game just conversationally, which was that you were under the impression that you could pull off a heist or an operation without ever physically entering the building. And that's partially true in the game, but not entirely with the things like physical hacks where you have to be the one to plug in some sort of thumb drive or disruptor or something. And it makes me wonder if they had cut out the combat, you know, because you're already some sort of ubermensch. You're this genius hacker, you're a competent combatant, you're
an excellent shot,
you're an engineer, you're an expert driver. You know, if they had just removed combat entirely, you know, I've heard a lot of talk about making it just non-lethal options more available, but
I mean, I think they could have gone a different route there as well. They could have said, I mean, this would obviously make it almost an entirely different game, but they could have had where if you're going on a mission and you decide you want a more shooty approach, you go in as Wrench or something along those lines, where you are the shooty character, and maybe he doesn't have the, I don't know, driving or hacking, or maybe he doesn't get the RC car or whatever that Marcus has. So for those who haven't played the game, Wrench is kind of the crazy dude with the mask that talks about blowing stuff up all the time. So, and each of these characters have their own strengths, and they kind of talk about those in the beginning of the game when they introduce everybody. So that would have been an interesting thing they could have done to make you not such overpowered Ubermensch type of character.
Yeah, Marcus definitely felt a little bit like a Mary Sue to me. Because
too.
I guess so. He's not female, but because so they introduced the DedSec characters, and they all have specific talents, and they all work together. And then Marcus shows up, and he's good at everything, and just does everything.
That's true. They have a free runner artist, they have a violent engineer, they have a super skilled hacker, and they have sort of a smooth operator type. But yeah, you don't need any of them. They're all obsolete once Marcus shows up for anything other than background noise. It would have been cool to see them do something. Maybe they were worried about aping GTA 5 too much with that sort of squad mentality where you could switch between Michael, Trevor, and Franklin. But I think that's a clever way to potentially limit players.
How did you guys feel about the visuals, the visual style of the game, graphics, etc.?
I loved this. I really liked San Francisco more than any other sort of sandbox modern city that I've played in. Liberty City, San Andreas, or Los Santos, or wherever the hell you are in GTA 5. What is it called? Steelport?
Steelport is
Saints Row.
Saints Row.
Oh.
Yeah, and I didn't play the first Watchdogs much, but that Chicago just felt so grizzled, grimdark. Everything's just big, gray, brutalist structures. And here you actually have people using, all the tools at their disposal. There's color, there's different sizes, there's the water structures, there's open spaces, but there are large downtown buildings as well, and it's just brighter a lot of the time, or when it is dark, it's purposefully dark. DedSec has a sort of aesthetic that's very neon and electric colors that just really sort of livened it up and kept the background from being boring, being dull, not being part of the game. I think that they did a really good job of making the city itself feel like one of the characters. It definitely held its own weight.
Yeah, I thought it was cool that they based it on the actual kind of map of San Francisco. It kind of reminds me of like Assassin's Creed or something, where they would take the old plans of the city and kind of base it on that. It gives a little more life, I think.
Was GTA the first one to do that, or was it? I don't think it was Assassin's Creed.
No, I believe that it was GTA 4 tried to ape New York as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure someone will go and say, "Oh, it was actually this game from 1996 that copied the road," or whatever. But like when it comes to modern open world games, at least current gen or last gen.
What was that Tom Clancy MMO?
I'm totally blanking.
The Division?
The Division.
Oh,
yeah.
Division, yes.
Because
of course.
that one had a really accurate...
I own that one. I forgot about it. I wonder how that happened.
Yeah, whoa. But I believe The Division was a sort of landmark in accuracy.
I have a T-shirt with that game on it, and I still forgot about it.
What?
It can't possibly be because that game is totally forgettable and not that interesting.
Nah.
I mean,
That can't be it.
I basically ended up ordering it before I had the computer that could play it, knowing I would be getting the computer, and in like the month and a half between then, it was part of that Humble Bundle, so I got it in the Humble Bundle, and I got the T-shirt with the Humble Bundle, and then everybody went from like, hey, this is cool that I was going to play this with, to like, oh, this game is, we're done with this. And I was like, I don't have anyone to play this with, and I am now not so excited to play this after everyone I know that's talked about it has been like, no.
Speaking of computers, Zach, did you notice significant differences between the PC version and the PS4 version? Because I think you're the only person who's played both.
Well, I felt like I saw it, but I feel like I'm kind of... bias might not be the right word, but...
bias is absolutely the right word.
I am more... Because I'm playing it on my my lovely machine here, I am more influenced to look for the differences, to be like, oh yeah, this was worth spending all of the money I did on this because look how much better it looks.
Yeah,
so,
bias
okay,
is...
Maybe that is... Bias is the right word. But
maybe.
I felt like it looked really good. I mean, honestly, like, I noticed frame rate differences a lot. I noticed tearing. There's a, like, I didn't notice it on Watchdogs, but, like, as that much. But, you know, when I see these things, now that I've played 60 FPS, 1440p, it is hard to go back, basically. And that's, I know it sounds like a snobby thing to say, but, like, even doing my very best to be objective about it, you don't notice so much going to it. It's going back from it is where you actually do notice. Like
going back to play an old generation of games.
Right, exactly.
And the graphics become insufferable.
So for those watching the stream, the footage that we have here is this particular clip is from my PC. This is everything on Ultra, except I think I'm only on like 2x for anti-aliasing, and that was like the recommended settings, or almost exactly the recommended settings for my setup, which is a GTX 1080 EVGA. I won't get into that, but it's EVGA FTW GTX 1080 with a really nice i7 or i7, excuse me. So this is not with the Ultra texture pack. This is that was one thing that they hyped with the PC version, was the Ultra texture pack, and this is not, the clip that's on screen right now is not with the Ultra texture pack. I installed that this morning. I have like an hour or so with that.
So did you just do I'm not going to get into it, but here is all of the details.
I think there are a lot of people that do want to hear that, though.
That's true.
But it goes completely over my head. What I was going to say, though, just from watching the footage ourselves on the screen that we have set up, I noticed that the images are sharper in cutscenes. When they do at the end of each major mission, there's a short clip that DedSec does that's their little propaganda blurb about what they did and what information they're releasing. And it's very grainy stylistically, on purpose, but it also then becomes very grainy when you're watching it on a lower resolution, like when I did on my PS4 on my TV, which I believe is 720 something.
It's probably 720p.
Sure. And so I noticed that just now, and when you're running, the smoothness of the camera control is noticeable, but it's not something that felt prohibitive. There were never any significant performance issues on the PS4. There were never frame rate drops so low as to make gameplay difficult, and there were few glitches that I encountered. The only one was that sometimes when jacking a vehicle, if something came into contact with the vehicle or somebody attacked me, basically if either of the objects involved, my player avatar or the vehicle, were moved in any way, the avatar would get shoved under the surface of the street and I would have to fast travel somewhere to escape. That happened about 3 times, but it didn't. It was a quick fix, and it was, like I said, the only real sort of bug that I noticed, and that wasn't even a performance issue. So it does run perfectly well on the PlayStation.
Yeah, I ran into a bug where I would be getting into a vehicle, and the vehicle would just disappear. So I'd just be doing like a power squat and then stand back up. I don't know if that happened to anybody else, but that happened to me enough times that I felt it was a consistent problem. I assume it will get patched out probably, but...
Oh, probably. They'll do patches for this game for another couple of months, maybe, if that.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, the PC version came out later, but I played PC version like day 1 or 2 that it had been out, which was only 6 days ago at this point, not that long ago. And I don't remember if it's downloaded any patches, but as for a Ubisoft game, this was good. This was progress.
Oh my gosh.
Because I didn't really notice nothing really. I mean, maybe I had to restart the game once.
No faceless NPCs.
There was it seemed like during a fast travel there was a little bit of a stutter immediately afterward, but I mean that's understandable, I guess. But yeah, that was really the only thing I noticed. On my setup, I got 60 frames solid, maybe dropping to 50-ish in a few spots. Inside it would get closer to 70 in certain areas, so it was no performance, no bugs in performance, at least that I experienced, which I know is something that happens a lot of times with
console ports.
With console ports, yeah. Hey, look, a rocket ship. How about that? So, anybody have anything to add about the visual style, the graphics?
No, I don't think... I think it was a very cleanly done game, and it wasn't very bold. So it was both proficient, and it didn't experiment with the visuals, so there isn't a whole lot to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can say, as someone interested in the visual arts, especially in countercultural mediums like graffiti and the paste up art that Dead Sex seems to be so fond of, whoever was in charge of this, their art director did their research. There is a really good example of artwork that I've seen precedents of in my own, that I've come across on my own, just knowing about different artists. And I'm not just talking about something like watching Exit Through the Gift Shop. They knew how to show what it takes to make this art. They have stencil uses. Their 3D printer was a magical lie. But
it said Magic Box on it,
It
right?
did say Magic Box. I appreciated that. That was a little nod to the fact that you can't print a single working machine. You just can't. You can't. There's nothing to add to that sentence. You can't just print a working machine. But that felt realistic. That felt accurate.
I mean,
to someone who knows about that kind of thing. So not just the city design and the world design, but the actual specific instances of art appearing in the game were well researched and well developed.
Well, you know what's funny is they could have changed. Sorry, go ahead, Hannah.
No, it's... Go ahead.
I was going to say they could have changed the way that the 3D printer worked to be a lot realer very easily. Instead of having you pull it out of the magic smoke, they could have just had the camera be Marcus's face and you see his arms pulling something out, but you can't see what. And then, he puts it on the table and fiddles with it for a second, and now it's a thing. And okay, maybe he didn't spend a real amount of time to assemble his quadcopter, but it shows that he printed the parts and put them together, and shows that the game understands that that's actually a thing that you can do to a degree with, quadcopter, RC car. People have done it with guns. You would need a different machine for guns probably, but it's a thing. It's that's a thing that people talk about, a controversial thing.
Sort of on that note, so they could have gone that direction. This is sort of circling back to what we talked about before, but they could have done that, made it more realistic, but I thought that, having it's magic box, we know this isn't really how it works, but hanging the lampshade,
Yeah,
and
that
TV
wasn't a big
trope
deal.
Yeah, like that helped with the tonal shift there. So if they did more of that
That's
with
true.
kind of the weird hacking thing that's obviously not realistic, but if they just kind of
I see what you're saying, yeah.
were sort of ironic about it, I think that could have helped tonally.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That reminds me, obviously there's some social commentary going on in this game. What did you guys think about that?
I think that they were smart when they handled it both realistically but not necessarily completely directly. Some of the commentary is direct, like the direct advertising or directed advertising and the sort of pseudo-security state fears that a lot of people out there have. But it's all sort of in the background. They're not making bold claims. There aren't caricatures of people. When one of the other members of DedSec has to deal with a racist coworker, he doesn't just walk up to him and start spitting slurs or grumbling them under his breath. He does that sort of over-assertive, looking for fault for no reason. It plants doubt, maybe he's not doing it because of, conscious racism, but there's a certain bias that he's representing. And I think that was smart to not let that subtract from the fun that the game is trying to have. Mm-hmm. I think that they were intelligent when they decided to make it part of the game so that they could make their statements without sacrificing the fun that a game is supposed to be,
So I think that Watch Dogs 2 should be held up as an example for how to do social commentary effectively in a game, but not the social commentary that it made, because I don't think it really made any bold statements. Like, a security state is bad. Like, people using all of our private data without our permission is bad. Like, it wasn't really making a new statement or a bold statement or an interesting statement. It pretty well stayed within at least the realm of consensus, but it did it in such a way that it wasn't just overtly throwing it in your face. This is our message.
You have to be careful about what consensus is. Like, the consensus that Trump was a joke in this election and he got elected anyway. Like, that wasn't the real consensus. There was enough people out there that disagreed with that feeling to elect him.
I mean, fair enough, but I think this game would have done well to have been a little bit more self-aware and have brought the point that, so you're calling this system horrible, but you're also abusing the system, to your own benefit.
That was a big blind spot.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to mention, is that they didn't really, they presented it really one-sided, and maybe, I didn't beat the very last mission or whatever, so maybe they address it later as part of the finale or whatever. But it seemed like, they make this statement against, big data, this company is selling this information on you. Obviously that's something Facebook and Google, etc., there's been controversy about them actually doing that in real life, and they didn't ever consider the possibility that okay, I get this really cool website that I get to use. If I'm making the conscious decision that instead of paying money to use this website, I am giving you information about me because that has value to you or the people you're selling it to. This is preferable to me paying $10 a month to use Facebook. And some people knowingly make that trade-off, and I wouldn't consider that to be wrong. Obviously, hiding it is wrong, and there are certain uses of that information that could be seen as wrong, but knowingly giving your information away because it has value to somebody else in exchange for something that you get isn't inherently bad, I don't think.
Yeah, I felt like they undermined their message a little bit by making all of the corporations really underhanded. I think it would have been a much better think piece if the corporations were a little bit more above board and it was actually asking the question, like, what is the point at which we are willing to stop trading our privacies for convenience?
Right.
Like, that's a much more compelling thing to ask than, hey, people stealing our data is bad.
Right, and it's sort of like it, and this kind of starts to get obviously into the realm of politics, but it, like, you have the idea that, okay, I came up with this really cool service, it's super Facebook, Google, rocket ship cars, or whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to let everybody use this for free, but I want to know everything about you. It's like, I totally lost my train of thought. It's just gone completely. I know what it was. So people kind of act like, and this is in real life, not just in the game, people act like, okay, well, I have a right to use this thing without giving away my data, and if this thing is, this miraculous invention and nobody else can do this service, nobody else does what Google does as well as Google does it, or else they would be Google, basically. People act like, okay, I have a right to use Google without giving up my privacy. Well, if Google just says hey, you can do our thing, but we want end of story, we want to know about you and use that information to our benefit to let you use this amazing work of engineering and programming and whatever to use it, that's their right. You people feel like, oh, I can't just go to can't just not use Google. Well, yeah, you can. If that's what they're charging to use Google is your information, then that's your choice. Just not use Google. That's what happens, and people feel like that's unfair, but it's just Google decided to charge $10,000 to use it. That's their right, and
Well, see, and I feel like that's the kind of question I wish that the game had asked.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. It was very one-sided. And of course, they didn't as far as I got, they didn't really touch on the idea that the hackers could be bad at all. That the hackers are using information for their gains, obviously.
They're seen as superheroes.
Right.
Or they're presented as superheroes.
So, they're all about, gaining followers, but, they don't ever talk about, oh, geez, there's a lot of, good people out there who don't like us because, yeah, we are kind of, doing bad things.
Yeah.
Even if you are in the world of the cutscenes where Marcus isn't running people over or shooting them in the face, they're still doing bad things. Actually coming up here, spoilers, they go and they hack into Bloom's data server, but through the process they go into space and they come down in Korea and they shut down the whole power grid for all of Korea or something like that, from space, which is what is probably 30 minutes ahead of what this clip is. That's bad. I know you claim to be doing it for good means, but that's bad. There's no other way around it.
Well, and that's an old question that also isn't as interesting, but the argument of do the ends justify the means is another thing that they could have explored and didn't. They just took it as a granted that, of course, the ends justify the means. You're the good guys. Mm-hmm. And they clearly aren't. I had a running joke with another friend that I was playing this with that whenever one of us did something just terrible in the course of an operation, we would just go, we're the good guys, we're the good guys. Don't worry, we're helping you, while their dead body is laying on the floor, because that's often what was happening, Even the stealth option where you don't interfere with affairs. One of the stealth kills is the melee one where you go out of your way to clobber people in the skull or choke them out and just do obscene types of violence to them. And while not, again, as interesting as the technological questions that were raised earlier, it's just what are you doing, Watchdogs, when you're not addressing this? In the very first cutscene, one of the members of DedSec looks at Marcus during his interrogation, or not interrogation, his his initiation mission. They go, he's got a gun. Is that a problem? and another one says something along the lines of, wait, let's see what he does. And that's it. That's the only time that they directly address not even violence, but potential violence perpetrated by a member. And that's it.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't noticed that before, but you're totally right. That was a very different tone than the entire rest of the game, which is how they treated that specific instance.
I think it could have been a very interesting story thread if people started to become suspicious of Marcus and think Marcus was too violent or becoming a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would have been an interesting thing to explore.
I mean, based on how far I got, that potentially could be something that happens near the end of the game. I haven't seen it yet, but...
If it does, I think it's completely undermined. Did either of you play the mission? I'm not sure if it was story critical or not, where Horatio is kidnapped.
Oh, that's definitely story critical. Yes.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure if you needed it to get to this point or not.
This is major spoilers for anyone who hasn't played it, by the way, going forward from this point.
Well, I was going to try to stay relatively spoiler-free. I was just going to say in the mission arc where Horatio is kidnapped, it's violence met with violence is the answer. That is their, without even blinking, that is their go-to response is you have come at us with violence and we will respond in kind or with greater violence. And that is immediately justified to every member of DedSec.
Yeah, I totally saw that.
So even if they go against that later, then they're just going against themselves.
Right.
Which I think they do a lot in this game already.
I think I'm gonna deal with the dog.
We're going to not say anything important while the door opens and
It
shuts.
doesn't
That goddamn fifth beetle
really matter.
just keeps pooping on the carpet.
So, what else was I going to say?
I think we should move on to the wish list.
Oh, yes, the wish list. What do you guys want for Christmas?
Okay, well, no, I wanted to actually introduce this because I think this is an opportunity, and I'm probably going to cut out this part because I'm just explaining it, but this is like almost a feature that you could sell as part of it. Like, what is our wish list for this game? You know, like, we can have this discussion and be like, what is one thing that you would have liked to see in the game or would have liked to change, or, you know, what I'm saying? So...
I agree with that. I think that's a thing that we do that not a lot of other channels do.
like a Letterman's top 10 style.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it doesn't have to be presented with as much pomp as that, but okay, let's move on to the next section that we have. We did it in the last game. I thought it would make a good feature. We're going to do what we're going to call the Groupthink wish list, and we're each going to go over one thing that we would have liked to seen in the game, removed from the game, or changed. And...
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right.
So you want me to do that?
Since you've been hosting this one, yeah.
Yes. So, moving on from here, we are going to move into our... I'm going to start that again. We're going to move into our Groupthink wish list. This is a kind of a feature we started last time, and we liked the way it went, so we want to continue it with our future games here. This is where we talk about one feature or some sort of thing we would want either added to or removed or maybe tweaked or changed from the game. And let's start with Russ. What would you like for Christmas this year, Russ?
Well, what I would like to see, I think, is a removal in the game from what I'd like to see. I know we're streaming, but give me a minute.
Santa got your tongue.
Santa got my tongue is absolutely what happened. What I want to see is, I just want to reiterate that I would have liked to see the violence removed from the game. Not because I'm opposed to violence, but I think it would have given the game a chance to sort of break away from most other sandboxes and sort of explore the extremities of all of the other gameplay elements that they added. It would have forced them to push themselves to make the other things like the remote vehicles, the hacking puzzles, which I loved. I wish more games actually engaged in puzzles that were even moderately challenging, you know? I'm sick of Zelda-style push the red block onto the red button style puzzles. really sort of pushed those boundaries and set themselves up as this sandbox that is as huge as Grand Theft Auto, but engaging in an entirely different way. I would have loved to see that and set this IP as something totally separate, you know, and you could even market that to more of a hacker, gamer, electronic nerd or enthusiast sort of crowd.
So what I thought was I would have liked to see more limits placed on the player. So this game takes the sandbox concept of let's give you lots of toys and you can choose however you want to play with them. But I think a better way to do it would have been to give the characters like limitations. So when you have to work around an obstacle with a limited set of tools, there's actually a much greater potential for creativity, which is what I think sandboxes are ultimately going for beyond size, is the ability to approach things how the player wants to approach them. So if you're given a more limited suite of tools to solve a problem with, you, by necessity, have to be more creative, and you have to use the larger sandbox environments more to your advantage. And I felt like a lot of the powers, especially being able to ring anybody's cell phone at any time and immediately distract them, or being able to just shoot someone if you were detected. I kind of liked the taser, but there was another problem I had with it that, on one hand, I liked that it was one shot and it was limited in that way, but on the other hand, I disliked that it just like, oh, I got spotted, but I want to play non-lethally, I'll just zap you and you'll instantly fall down, and it will just be like, okay, whatever. And the game doesn't really keep score. It's not like Dishonored where it will say, you finished this zone without being seen. It gives you no props for that. So if you want to go out of your way and not be seen, you can do it. But there's no limitation in place such that doing something like that is necessary.
I have kind of two things, I guess. First thing would be I would like to see customizable quadcopters, and this is probably just a me thing, but the drones, obviously there are different kinds of drones that have different capabilities, and you could have introduced that, and as someone who has a passive interest in that as kind of a hobby, it would have been I thought it would have been cool to introduce people to that kind of idea that there are more than one drone and not all of them are evil camera machines to spy on you, although I guess, and if Marcus is using them, they probably are. The second part of this, or the second thing I wanted to mention was I thought that they could have included maybe some of the parkour code from Assassin's Creed, and not that you would be like a super parkour assassin guy, but I felt myself really frustrated in a few spots, missing jumps that I think a regular, like, normal human being should be able to make, because the game didn't understand what type of jump I was trying to make, and I felt like, lately the later Assassin's Creed games have had that down pretty well, or at least the situations where I ran into where I fell, I didn't feel like I would have fallen in an Assassin's Creed game. So yeah, I wish they would have worked on the climbing, jumping. Like, there was every part where I saw that I actually had to physically climb and couldn't just fly up with my quadcopter. I was just like kind of dreading, because all of them felt unfun, basically. So I would have liked better climbing and less climbing missions, which is kind of self-contradictory, but both of those things.
I think it would be remiss of me to not mention the music in this game, because I have an unabashed and sort of overwhelming love for punk rock and loud, angry sounds, and this game did a fantastic job of including that and other types of sort of countercultural or fringe cultural music. I mean, sure, there were other like pop songs that you could listen to because they do want to have broad reach, but a lot of their rock was by interesting current independent artists. They had punk rock from across the board, all sorts of different subgenres. I mean, they had classics like Leatherface and Direct Hit, oh my god, Leatherface and Jawbreaker, they had New Stars like direct hit, and they had sort of everything in between, and it was just really impressive, the scope that they had. It was really nice to see somebody just put in the effort to represent that kind of thing, instead of just being like, oh, they want punk music? Well, here's the Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones that everybody knows. And doesn't have anything. Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with anything. And I'm not as familiar with some of the other genres like the world music or the rap, but I would hope that people that were fans of those styles of music felt the same way. That they were sort of given the respect to actually have their music choices researched and then represented. It was just a nice touch. It was. That's where I'm leaving that sentence. Forget it.
I think it's definitely a nice thing as a player to have like real music in there. As a YouTuber, it's kind of a pain because I don't know how many clips would not get muted on YouTube, but we'll see what happens.
The Game Awards got muted.
I'm not surprised, even a little bit.
That's hilarious. That doesn't stop being funny to me. Content ID muted the stream of the Game Awards.
Good. I'm good.
I mean, there's plenty of cases of Content ID, like, muting the official... Music videos, not so much, I haven't heard about, but, like, game soundtracks and stuff, that happens often, where an official channel gets muted by showing a clip of their own game, basically.
I love that. I think, what was it, Nintendo had a Content ID claim on their own site.
Yeah, yep. So, yeah, that's funny. Let's just... I didn't get enough of those in there. I think that's it.
Is that it? That's all we want? That's about an hour. That'll edit down probably to about 47 minutes.
So, this wraps up our second ever Groupthink Gaming Roundtable. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe on, or follow, on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/groupthinkgaming. Follow us on Twitter @groupthinkgames.
We should be on iTunes next weekend.
We should be on iTunes very soon, I would assume under a similar name. And we have a Facebook as well, facebook.com/groupthinkgaming. I have been Zach.
I'm Russ.
And I was Craig.
And everybody have a great
time.